Shalom guys, welcome back to another episode here at Just Shop You Ministries with Casa de Israel Yarah. Thank you for being there. So this week we're going to start Torah portion Shemot. Alright, we're going to be with the book of Shemot. And the book of Shemot means names. Is commonly known or traditionally known as Exodus. Right? We have the story of Exodus of the people of Israel, Moses. And so it's pivotal to the Jewish faith. But also to Christian faith, right? It defines the whole Bible. It is, I think, one of the most fundamental elements in the story of the people of Israel, Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah, and so it's very important. And so it's good because we need to review it, know it, understand it in its context, because it's very prophetic, but also it teaches us a lot about not only us as humans in relationship with God, but also in opposition to God. And I think that's one of the most important elements that this book is trying to define. The ego of men being broken down through the instructions of God. Okay? So, if you like the content that we're uploading on our channel, like and subscribe. If you have questions, comments, concerns, put in the comment section down below. Thank you for the support. Those of you that tune in, like, share, comment. I appreciate it. We appreciate it as a community, as a congregation, and as a ministry. Okay? So, let's get started. So like I said, we're doing Torah portion Shemot. And is in Exodus chapter 1 verse 1 through Exodus chapter 6 verse 1. The Haftorah of the prophets portion is Isaiah 27 verse 6 through Isaiah 28 verse 13. There's also Isaiah 29 verse 22 through 23. And you have the prophets portion also of Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 2 verse 3. The Brit Hadashah New Testament portion is 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verses 13 through 25. This is the location that we are in, right? In Lower Egypt, Ramses Zoan, Pibitset, Goshem, right? So this is the area in which, you know, the majority of the story of the Exodus is occurring, which is just important for us to have an idea, okay? In the intervening years between the death of Joseph and the end of Genesis and the opening of Exodus, the Hebrews multiplied to the point that the new Pharaoh, probably one who represented a new dynasty or era, feared they would increase and join their enemies and flee from Egypt. And before we get started, let's do the Torah blessing. Baruch Adonai haOram, Baruch Adonai haOram leolam ba'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bacharvanu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah. Bless Adonai who is blessed, bless Adonai who is blessed now and forever. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and given us the Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives the Torah. Amen. So, this week's Torah portion starts the following way. Va'el Shemot b'nei Yisrael habayim misrama et Yaakov ish ubeto ba'u. In English, says the following. These are the names of the sons of Israel. That is Jacob, who moved to Egypt with their father, each with his family. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulon, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. In all, Jacob has 70 descendants in Egypt, including Joseph, who was already there. In time, Joseph and all of his brothers died, ending the entire generation. Right? So the focus, at least I'm going to have for this introduction of Shemot, is the pivotal part of the transition from Genesis to the Exodus, right? And how we can never forget where we were and where we are and where we're going, and all of it is aligned with the same message, right? The locations and the context of the culture might change, but the purpose that is trying to be manifested and fulfilled is the same, right? Nothing is changing, right? The variables that change are mainly cultural, and obviously depending on who we're addressing in the context. But besides that, God's message is the same, right? It doesn't change. The mission and the purpose is the same, okay? And so Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the ones that are basically containing the purpose of God, the mission of God. In them all the nations of the earth will be blessed, and their seed will inherit the land. Okay, that is the message. And they will do it because God told them to and promised them and made a covenant with them. Okay, now Exodus is very important, and I like it because it starts to, in many ways, break down the ego of men. And in this case, Pharaoh is a representation of that. The independent man, the all-knowing, knowledgeable man, the wise man, the man that is so wise that he knows more than God, and he is God himself, the self-worshiping man, right? And in many ways, that man gets so overconfident and self-centered and righteous that he ends up self-destructing, right? And again, in this story is Pharaoh, right? But like I always tell my youth in my community, when I'm able to lead and have that privilege, we can never count ourselves out of having the character of Pharaoh, right? The story of Pharaoh is very important because it teaches us that human beings can be so blind by power, greed, and influence that they can believe that something that they have never created, which is creation itself, is to their disposal and to their authority. And so Pharaoh in this narrative had to learn the hard way that if he doesn't obey God's commands, he's doomed to perish. Okay? So, in the narrative, in this situation, we're introduced to the children of Israel because they're important to the story, that they came down to Egypt. They settled there with Joseph. Joseph passes, Jacob passes, and many generations pass. And a new king in Egypt is raised. But this king, it says that he doesn't know Joseph, right? And many interpretations say don't know him as he never met him, or basically the Pharaoh does not recognize Joseph and what Joseph had to provide and bring to Egypt, which was salvation, right? Joseph changed the course of history, not only for Egypt, but for many nations in the narrative, understanding that through his gift of not only the dreams he had, but also the interpretation of dreams that he himself attributed to God, he wouldn't have been able to help Egypt turn the tide on the famine that was about to come. But God, Jehovah, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, and the God of Joseph, spoke to Pharaoh in that time through Joseph, and that Pharaoh was wise enough and humble enough to recognize that even in his ignorance, establishing himself still as God over Joseph, he understood that Joseph will speak and he will be the one in control. And he let God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, in his ignorance, be in control of Egypt. And so this new Pharaoh does not do that. He forgets Joseph, and by forgetting Joseph, he forgets the God of Joseph, which is Jehovah. And he forgets about the children of Israel. And he turns this story into a story of assumptions where he believes that Israel will grow in number as they are right now, and they will leave and they will join his enemies. And if they leave and join his enemies, because they're so numerous, they can become so powerful and they can come back and destroy him. Hence, he decides to oppress them and put hard labor upon them. And in the narrative, as we know, as they oppress and oppress, they grow and grow. So he decides to eliminate the males and keep the females. And in that process, Moses is basically saved. He's thrown into the Nile, and he is found by the daughter of Pharaoh, and he is raised in the palace. Okay, now Moses grows in there, knows, understanding he's a Hebrew, and also part of the family of the kingship and the Pharaoh. Understanding that, he ends up killing a man because he was oppressing one of the Hebrews. And in this case, he's afraid that Pharaoh will find out, which he does. He flees because he's about to get killed, and he becomes basically a pastor in the land of Midian. And so in that land, as he is there basically starting over, because now he doesn't have the privileges of an Egyptian prince, so now he's a shepherd in the land, guiding sheep in patience. And there the Lord appears to him and calls to him and reveals himself to him. And that's where we are, right? Today we're going to start in Exodus 3, 16 and through 20. And then from there we'll focus on the message, at least that we want to continue through the book of Exodus and into the book of Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Okay, let's continue. Exodus 3, 16 to 20 says, "Go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, and Amorites, Perizzites, Hebusites, Jebusites, and the land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards his people, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in her house for articles of silver and gold for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters. And so you will plunder the Egyptians." This is key because after he has the revelation, I am who I am. I'm the one that lives. I'm the one that brings forth life and being. Jehovah, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. He tells Moses that he has to go to the elders. Now, the elders in Israel that are in Egypt understand the narrative of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They understand the promise. They understand the expectations and the prophecies of you will go into a land flowing with milk and honey, as they are in Egypt, especially in this moment where they're being oppressed. Hence, Moses has to go to these elders and remind them of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that one that they've been crying out to, right? Because it says that they cried out in their oppression, and God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, heard their cry and remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Hence, this is why Moses is being called, because Moses has been chosen to fulfill the promise or start the direction and the diversion of the oppression into freedom to the promises. Okay, and so God tells Moses to go to the elders, and once the elders understand who has been sent, they will remember the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they'll understand the message. But Pharaoh won't understand the message because he doesn't recognize the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And this is key because we can never forget that God has defined himself as the God of Abraham, as the God of Isaac, and as the God of Jacob. Okay? So, let's continue. Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" A staff, he replied. The Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. And the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. And so there's a sign, not only the confession that he is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he has to be the one that's calling, but also Moses has the signs for them also, so they can understand who he is and why he's there and who has sent him there. And it says that when they saw these things, they bowed down and worshipped. Okay, so now Moses is going to Pharaoh. Okay, and Aaron says, after Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness. Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. Then they said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with the plagues or with the sword. But the king of Egypt said, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work. Then Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working. So it's interesting because if you pay attention, in the narrative of Joseph, it is highlighted that he's a Hebrew and that he has the capability of interpreting dreams. Okay? And I made this point very emphatic when I taught the adult class or with the main congregation, that the point of Joseph being a Hebrew before he becomes second in command is key, because anything in history, or especially in the context of the story of Joseph, everybody knows that he is a Hebrew and that this Hebrew spoke on behalf of his God, the God of the Hebrews. Hence, by definition, the God of the Hebrews is the one that saved Egypt in the narrative of Joseph. Hence, when Moses brings up Jehovah, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the God of Israel, and Pharaoh says, I don't know him, but then there's a very specific clarification. It says, the God of the Hebrews has met with us, is very important, because now this Pharaoh either is ignorant to the history or is blatantly careless about who is speaking, because he's now recognizing, just like or unlike the Pharaoh before him, that the God of the Hebrews has spoken. In the same way that Joseph told that Pharaoh that God will show you the message of this dream, and what he's showing you is what he will do. In this case, this Pharaoh used no wisdom. Okay? And so he focused on making the people work. Remember, the story has to do with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the promises, and how the fulfillment of the promises to Joseph, and now through Moses and the descendancy, is going to be key, and what's going to bring salvation to anyone in the book of Exodus is if they listen to God's instruction, and in this case, Moses. Because when Moses says, I'm not worthy, I'm not prepared, God tells him, I have made man's lips and speak and in speech. I've given man the ability to speak, so I can give you the ability to speak. And you have your brother Aaron, so you will tell Aaron what to say, and Aaron will say what you can't say or won't say, and I will put my words in you and in him. So, in this whole ordeal that we're talking about, which is Pharaoh against Moses, one of the cultural points that I've always say that we have made a big mistake in religious circles is attributing this book to Moses, the book of Moses. And even though Moses is part of this book, this is the book of God. God spoke. Moses listened and repeated. So the words that we have are the words of God. And the instructions we have are the instructions of God that came from heaven. Okay? So, let's continue. Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Why, Lord? Why have you brought trouble on these people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble to this people, and you have not rescued your people." And it's interesting because this is very relatable in many ways, because here we're focusing on understanding that Moses himself is not even attributing the words that he's speaking to himself. So he's saying, you sent me here. You told me to speak these instructions and these commands. And the reaction to the commandments that you're giving are negative. And because you have commanded these things, they have also oppressed them. And this is why you gave me these commands, so that they can become oppressed, so that I can be accused of making them being oppressed and being overworked, right? So there's a frustration of the introduction of, in the world where men are in control and they create the laws and the commands and the culture and the tradition. When Moses comes into it to speak God's commandments, the world does not accept it. And in this case, Pharaoh. And because Pharaoh doesn't accept it, Israel is oppressed. And Moses is saying, your commands have brought more oppression to the people. And he's a little frustrated because he thought that by just God's commands being spoken, things will happen. But remember, these commands are speaking to the soul of a man. And in this case, to Pharaoh, which is the ego of a man. All right? So, let's continue. Then the Lord said to Moses, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of the country. God also said to Moses, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself fully known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they raised as foreigners. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore, say to the Israelites, I am Jehovah, Adonai, the Lord, and I will bring you out of under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with the mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. So, the reaffirmation of what's happening is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have a promise. They have faith. They had obeyed my commands. So Moses, understand this. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they obeyed my commandments. They were faithful to me. They have faith in me and in what I said, and whatever I told them to do, they put it into action. So understand that whatever I'm telling you to do, put it into action, because through you I will be manifesting what I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because I will continue to be faithful to them because they were faithful to me. So stay faithful. Listen to what I'm saying. Obey my commands, and I will show you my might. Okay? So, it's amazing. All right, let's continue. Now, the question is, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Because this is what's happening in Egypt too, right? He grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of the dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, and a man of suffering, a familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we consider him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. So this is a big pivot and a big transition, because I've established the point of the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that are starting to be manifested in the book of Exodus, Shemot, with the story of Israel and Moses. But in the story of Israel and Moses, God's mighty hand was manifested to bring down the ego of men and establish a historical fact and precedence that no man's ego and authority will go over God's commands. There's no man that can over command what God has already established. If God said it will happen, he will fulfill. And men are called to obey because they are created by God. Now, in this situation, God tells Moses, hey, I understand. I told you to do something and you don't understand what I'm going to do. Because you thought that you were going to go to Pharaoh and Pharaoh's going to be like, right on. But he's not going to do that. But I will show you that I am faithful to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and to these people. And I will take them to the land that I promised their fathers. And I will show my mighty hand because I am faithful to what I said I will do. Now, when we go to Isaiah, Isaiah is describing the same message, but the one that will come like Moses, right? The prophet like Moses, the anointed one from the house of David. His situation is different because unlike Moses in many ways was still recognized. In the oppression of Egypt, Moses still was recognized. Because when Moses brought them Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he brought them the signs. They were like, we recognize this God. And they bowed down and worshiped. And even in the oppression of the extra work, they still recognize the miracles that Moses was fulfilling. And they have faith. But in our times, when Yeshua was manifested, it was very different. Because the ego of men was spread. The selfishness and the desire to survive over the desire to obey and love God was more powerful. And in this case, Isaiah 53 is describing one who grew out in everything that men cultivated in hate, disobedience, and chaos was put upon him. Okay? Now, what was the message? Moses reported this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their discouragement and harsh labor. So, like I said, in their moments, they had frustration because Moses was teaching them that God had commanded him to do these things, to go to Pharaoh, to free them. And whenever he told them these great things about them being delivered, that God was going to show his mighty hand, they were a little sad about it because, man, you can say a lot, but we're still working hard. We're still being oppressed. We haven't seen anything yet. But remember, in the narrative, even though they're reacting negatively, as the signs start to appear and manifest, their faith is solidified because they see that Moses is speaking and things are happening. Hence, they are right now discouraged in the narrative because of the harsh labor. But as the time goes on, in Egypt, they're starting to recognize that God is with Moses. Okay? So, this example says, just because the commandments of God are introduced and are starting to be applied, it doesn't mean that men will react accordingly. Matthew 7, verse 21 to 27 says, no, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father, who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons? And in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundations on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with great crash. We have two pharaohs. The Pharaoh of Joseph was wise because he heard the words of God and built Egypt in that moment based on what our Messiah has taught us on the rock. Because on the instructions of God, that Pharaoh put Joseph second in command over all Egypt. And Pharaoh was wise enough to say, Jehovah, the God of the Hebrews, be in control, and we will do as you say. But this second Pharaoh started to build on sand. And the moment he started to build on sand was when he said, I don't know the God of the Hebrews, and I don't follow his commands. But you know who follow his commands? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Yeshua, our Messiah. The instructions of God, even though when we apply them, won't necessarily cause unity, because our Messiah told us that he didn't come to bring peace. He came to bring division, but not because he intentionally did so, but because he knew that once he came and started to establish God's commandments, the ego of men and the desire of men will conflict. So, are we going to adjust our egos? Are we going to start to listen? Are we going to start to establish our faith and our foundation on the rock or on sand? Because Yeshua says the only ones that will come into that heavenly realm are the ones that do the will of my Father who is in heaven. And everything that we have been revealed and that we will be revealed in the book of Exodus is heavenly. So there's nothing in heaven that will pass away, especially the words. So this is what I have for this week. I hope it makes sense. Shemot, the book of Exodus, is going to be an interesting one. We'll see what the Lord has in store for us. I hope it makes sense. I hope you learned something new. If you didn't, I'm sorry. Did my best. Have a great week. Shabuah Tov and Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.